Picture this. Over 2,000 years ago, a man named Aristotle shaped how we think, learn, and understand the world forever. His ideas still echo today, influencing everything from science to politics to ethics. But who exactly was this man? How did he become one of the greatest thinkers in human history, and why should you care? Stick around because in this video we'll break down the life, legacy, and genius of Aristotle like never before. Aristotle wasn't born into greatness. He came from a small town called Stagira in northern Greece in the year 384 before Christ. His father was a court physician, meaning Aristotle was likely exposed to early teachings in biology and medicine from a young age. But by the age of 17, everything changed. Aristotle packed his bags and traveled to Athens, the intellectual hub of the ancient world. And it was here that he'd make one of the most important connections of his life, studying under the legendary philosopher Plato. Plato's academy was the Ivy League of its time, and Aristotle quickly rose to become one of Plato's star students. But what's really interesting is how different Aristotle's ideas would eventually become from his teachers. So what exactly did Aristotle learn from Plato? Well, Plato believed in something called the theory of forms. He thought that everything we see around us, trees, animals, people, was just a shadow of a perfect ideal version of itself that existed in some higher realm. Aristotle, however, wasn't having any of that. He believed that what we see in the world is real. This tree right in front of you, it's not just some imperfect copy of a perfect tree in another realm. Aristotle was all about observing the real world and coming up with theories based on what we can actually see and measure. This is why he's often credited as the father of science. He believed in using evidence, observation, and logic to understand the universe. Now, let's pause for a moment. At this point in the story, Aristotle is about 37 years old. He's spent over 2 decades at Plato's academy, but Plato has passed away, and Aristotle is looking for new opportunities. So what does he do? He takes on a new job, one that would change history. He becomes the tutor of a young prince named Alexander. Yep, Alexander the Great. At the time, Aristotle was probably like, no big deal, just teaching this kid. But Alexander would grow up to conquer half the known world. And while it's hard to say exactly how much Aristotle influenced Alexander, some historians believe that Aristotle's teachings on leadership, ethics, and politics helped shape Alexander's approach to ruling. After his time with Alexander, Aristotle returned to Athens and set up his own school, the Lyceum. Now, this wasn't just your average philosophy school. Aristotle's Lyceum was more like a modern research institute. Here, Aristotle taught students and conducted groundbreaking research in biology, astronomy, physics, and more. He would have his students walk with him around the school gardens while he taught, and this method of teaching is why Aristotle's followers were known as the Peripatetics, which literally means people who walk around. When it comes to science, Aristotle was ahead of his time. In fact, he's often called the first biologist. His fascination with the natural world led him to observe and categorize hundreds of different animal species. He wasn't just sitting in a room thinking. Aristotle was out there dissecting animals, examining their anatomy, and figuring out how they fit into the larger puzzle of life. In his work, History of Animals, Aristotle describes different species, their behaviors, and their anatomy. Sure, some of his ideas weren't always correct, like thinking that eels are born from mud, but for the time, this was revolutionary. He laid the groundwork for the scientific method by insisting that observations of the real world were the key to understanding it. One of Aristotle's most famous contributions to philosophy is his theory of ethics, especially his work in the book Nicomachean Ethics. So what was his big idea? Aristotle believed that the ultimate goal in life was happiness, but not happiness in the way we might think of it today. He called it eudaimonia, which roughly translates to human flourishing. Aristotle argued that to achieve happiness, you have to live a life of virtue. This means developing qualities like courage, honesty, and generosity, not in extreme ways, but in a balanced, moderate way. He called this the golden mean, finding balance between too much and too little of any trait. For example, courage is a virtue. But if you have too much courage, you're reckless, too little, and you're a coward. Aristotle believed the key to a happy life was mastering this balance in all things. Now, what's interesting is that Aristotle didn't just stop at personal ethics. He expanded his philosophy into how societies should be structured. In his book Politics, Aristotle examines the different types of governments, comparing democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy. He believed the best government was one where the middle class had the most power, as they were least likely to be corrupt or driven by extreme wealth or poverty. Sound familiar? Many of his ideas about balance and justice have influenced modern political thought, especially the development of democratic governments. Let's not forget one of Aristotle's most groundbreaking contributions, logic. Before Aristotle, there wasn't really a formal system for proving whether something was true or false. Aristotle invented a system called syllogism, which is basically a way to form logical arguments. For example, all humans are mortal. Socrates is human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. It seems simple now, but this form of reasoning laid the foundation for modern logic, mathematics, and even computer science. So why does all of this matter today? Why do we still talk about Aristotle over 2,000 years later? Well, the truth is, Aristotle's ideas laid the groundwork for so much of what we take for granted in modern life. Whether it's science, ethics, politics, or logic, his teachings have been built upon by countless scholars over the centuries. Figures like Thomas Aquinas, Copernicus, and Galileo were directly influenced by his work. Even today, in classrooms around the world, students still learn about Aristotle's theories and how they apply to modern challenges. Aristotle's legacy is more than just ancient texts gathering dust on a shelf. His ideas are alive in our scientific methods, our ethics, and even in how we think about government. His story shows us the power of curiosity, observation, and a relentless pursuit of knowledge. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed learning about Aristotle, hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos on history's greatest thinkers. And hey, let us know in the comments what's the one thing about Aristotle that surprised you the most.